Okay everybody, welcome back to my channel on this lovely Wednesday afternoon. Well, it's Wednesday for me, I don't know when I'll be able to get this video out. Might be Friday for all I know, the way that YouTube seems to run in this house. But welcome back to my channel and welcome to episode 2 of Edward's Wild World of Nature. Now, today, it's going to be a little bit different because quite frankly, the weather is absolutely rubbish at the moment, and if it starts raining while I'm out, I may need to cut the recordings a little bit shorter than normal, because I don't want to damage the camera. But today I'm going to be going to a different part of the town, and I'm going to be taking you guys to a little monument, if you will, that's rather special to our town. It was fashioned quite a long time ago. I'm not too sure how long ago. It was sometime during the 20th century. But I'm going to be showing you what you can see around there, and yeah, then next week I'll be taking you to a little local reserve and showing you all of the stuff that's... Because reserves and some other different habitats around the country vary with the seasons, if you will. During the summer it can be waders, various different types of songbirds. You get cuckoos, birds of prey, all that kind of stuff coming up from Africa to breed. And then during the winter, it's all kinds of wildfowl and other waders that have gone up to the Arctic to breed, and they're overwintering here. So yeah, ducks, geese, swans, that sort of thing. So I'll be showing you around there this week, next week, sorry. But first of all, I've got a little montage for all of you of all the birds that I've seen in my garden for the first half of this week, as well as one other very familiar animal that a lot of you guys, I'm sure, are familiar with and may consider a pest in your garden. You'll see what I mean when I show you. So yes, enjoy the montage. You guys hear that song thrush?
Again.
Yeah, look, he's on the bird bath.
He's probably doing that because Pebbles is under the table.
Yes, she is actually.
Yes.
That's just a gentle warning cheer.
Yes.
I didn't know they had the same alarm call as blackbirds. Yes, he's got his eye on her. How about when I go and wash the furniture, I tip the water all over her when I'm done?
Yeah.
Sounds good to me.
Is it a babe? What is
Squirrel.
it? Oh my god.
This friend of his wife's called and said, my cat's just come in with this in its mouth, it's a bit scratched up. What can I do? But she's now adopted.
Got a squirrel. She's
Yeah.
adopted a squirrel.
Well, it looks like she's leaving them alone now, thank God.
interesting thing. This is a quote from the diary of Sam.
There's a robin fledgling that Pebbles hasn't eaten yet. The blue-tip fledglings have descended en masse again.
Good. Jesus Christ.
So obviously you saw that little montage that I prepared for you there. You saw all the different types of birds that I've recorded from this from the first couple of days anyway. So chaffinches, robins, blackbirds, sparrows, blue tits, song thrushes, robins, even and of course the common garden visitor, the squirrel, the emptier of bird feeders as I call it. That wasn't the pest I was referring to though. The pest you may have seen was my sister's lovely cat, Pebbles. Now Pebbles is basically our resident serial killer. Basically, she has brought in more birds than any other cat we have ever owned in this house. She has killed mice, voles, shrews, insects, anything that moves basically. She is awful, and she especially likes to raid birds' nests during the breeding season. I especially wanted to wring her neck, so to speak, when she brought in an entire family of robin fledglings early in the year. But otherwise, unfortunately, if I did, I would have got a very severe beating from my sister, so obviously I didn't. But throughout the year, you'll see many different types of birds in your garden. I mean, stepping out of the house in, say, early February, what's the first thing you might hear? House sparrows around the house? In the distance, a male song thrush performing his song to attract a mate ready for the breeding season. Collared dove calling from the rooftop. Starlings broadcasting from the TV aerial. Blackbirds calling in the morning. And it's wonderful to hear. The dawn chorus is when, at dawn, all the birds get together on their perches in the tree and they'll all sing at once. It is so beautiful and it's worth listening to. Sometimes when I've woken up earlier than my alarm in the mornings, I've woken up and I've heard it out of my window. It is gorgeous. Hearing so many different varieties of birdsong at once. It's music to your ears. If you're a naturalist, I don't know how anybody else would feel about it. But yes, anyways. So, yeah, that was just a small range of birds that you can see in your garden. It can be way more extensive than that, and it does vary with the seasons, as I said before. I mean, as habitat loss has happened, various different types of birds like blue tits, chaffinches, and other finches, even woodpeckers. Woodpeckers, you'll see, are more common on bird feeders these days now because they've been driven out of their natural homes by deforestation and such, and they've had to adapt. They have had to adapt. And they're using our gardens as basically a refuge. As long as there's a good amount of woodland area around, like the back of the houses for them to live in, they're all set. And green woodpeckers, they feed on the ground. They're a very rare case of woodpecker. They feed on the ground and dig for ants. So you might get lucky one of these days. They might find like an ant mound or something in your garden that they like and pay a visit sometime. It's happened to us. It's definitely happened to us. And great spotted woodpeckers use our garden as a winter food refuge as well. They'll come down to the peanut feeders all the time. But since deforestation has happened, and oak woods, deciduous forests that all these birds live in, they prefer deciduous forests over, say, conifers like pine trees and such, because of the sap. They can't nest in pine trees because there's so much sap it would be poisonous to the chicks. But the problem is, with all these woodlands, these oak woodlands being taken out, they're losing their natural food source, because caterpillars live in oak woods as well. So they need this food source and they're not getting it. So that's why bird tables are so important to them. Yes, so I'm going to tell you a little bit about a couple of birds that I filmed in there. You'll probably know a lot about stuff like blackbirds and that. But first I'm going to start with the chaffinch. So you saw the male chaffinch there, very resplendent in his red face, red breast, grey cap, and of course the black wings with the white and yellow bands down the edges. The females, of course, not quite so resplendent, but they do still sport the black and white striped wings. And they are an all-year-rounder in this country. Now, they've been in this country for centuries. And in the 1500s, they were given the name in Old English, seafink. Sea means chaff, and fiac means finch, basically. So, fink means finch. And, of course, as language developed over time in this country, that developed as well. Now, the males have 2 to 3 different types of song, and I've heard them. I have a recording here of the male song, and I'd like to play it for you now, just to give you a taster of what that sounds like. So this is one of them. Now notice how different that one was. I'll play it again. So this is one. And this is the other. Now they both sound very similar, but they are different, very brassy. And very sort of screeched in a way, very drawn out. And he'll use this song, of course, to attract a mate to his territory during the breeding season. They nest when they're about 1 year old, and they raise a clutch of 2 to 4 eggs like most songbirds. The female does all the work. Now this is very common in various different songbirds that I've seen. The male will attract her in, provide her with food and shelter. She does all the nest building and all the egg laying. And she'll build their nest out of moss, lichen, all different types of fine material, and of course line it with feathers. And they often build their nests, finches, in like a fork in a tree. And I've actually seen this because some goldfinches once built a nest in a very small, fruit tree in my workplace. And it was very, unfortunately the tree was very tall and very straight. And it was waving about so much in the wind, I was worried that the chicks wouldn't survive. But they did. Thankfully they did. So yes, they laid in between sort of April and June. But this may change. With climate change and temperatures changing during the seasons, this may change. We never know. So it is something to look out. So the male and female chaffinch will feed their young for about 11 to 18 days until they're ready to fledge, and then they'll continue to feed them for about a further 3 weeks. Now because of this, it's very rare for them to lay more than 1 brood in a season, but they'll always build a new nest if they do, because after a while they'll stop taking out. So the young, when the young eat, they produce these sacs of basically wee and poo, basically these fecal sacs. And the parents will remove those from the nest for a while, but after a while they may stop and it becomes very, very smelly and disgusting in the nest. And of course they'll have to keep the chicks protected from predators like crows, squirrels, domestic cats of course, and stoats and weasels. And then after about a further 3 weeks the young will be free to feed themselves. So yeah, that is the chaffinch. And then the second one I wanted to talk about was the song thrush. Now the song thrush has of course earned its reputation for the song that it produces over the course of the spring. Now the males will climb to their favoured song perch in the early spring and broadcast their wonderful song out to the females, and it'll be they're very repetitive song thrushes. So the male has, pardon me, various different syllables in his song. He'll sing the same syllable about 4 times, then move on to a different one. And he may sing this in a bit of a cycle. He'll sometimes come back to the same one sometimes, but they're extremely varied, and they mimic other birds as well. Like one that we've had out the back of our garden sounded like a hawk calling or something, and it fooled my parents a couple of times. I had to convince them it wasn't, but it definitely was a song thrush. It's lovely to hear. If you go and just sit out and try and listen for one, it is very beautiful to hear. So this is what it sounds like. I've got a record. Now I should say at this point, these recordings that I'm playing to you, I haven't recorded these myself. I was very generously gifted by my godparents the Collins Guide to Bird Songs and Calls by author Jeff Sample. Now he has done a very, very good job, I must admit, of capturing all these different bird songs, because this must have taken hours and hours of patience of listening to, and several very early mornings. So let's just have a listen to this. I know I sort of dragged that out for a bit, but it is beautiful. It really is. So, yes, and they'll sing that during the spring, and obviously they have a larger relative in this country, the missel thrush, slightly larger, paler, a lot more spots on the breast, and a good way to identify... Whoops. Sorry, camera just fell over just then. A good way to identify the pair of them is how high in the tree they're perched. So the missel thrush tends to favour the very top of the tallest tree, whereas song thrushes tend to go slightly lower down. And these are just 2 types of thrush that we get in this country. The missel thrush is the biggest. Song thrush is one of the more medium-sized thrushes. They're solitary. They're very solitary, apart from in the breeding season when they come together with the females to breed. And the other 2 types of thrush that we get in this country, the blackbird does sort of count as a sort of thrush, but it's its own species. But it is relative to thrushes. But the other 2 types of thrush we get in this country are both migrants, and they're very sociable. So the complete opposite to the ones we get in this country. The fieldfare and the redwing. The redwing is the smallest out of the pair. The fieldfare is slightly more sizable to the song thrush. Fieldfares have a sort of blue head, orange beak, but they still retain the sort of brown on the wings and spotting on the chest. Redwings are obviously red wings, so brown, spotted on the chest, and of course red wings. So yes, look out for them during the winter when they come down, and they'll feed on stuff like berries and such. Now the song thrush will feed on berries during the winter when insects are probably a lot more scarce, but during the spring, and of course when it rains, rain obviously drives worms up from under the surface of the ground, and you'll often see them having a bit of a tug of war with a worm as they try and pluck it out of the soil. And then of course they eat slugs, they eat a lot of slugs, and they have their favourite food source, the snail. Now the snail and the song thrush are both very well known for one reason. Song thrushes have devised a very particular talent for eating snails. They'll use a rock, if you like. They'll have a particular rock that they choose as like a favourite, or they may use any in desperate times. But they'll use a rock as basically an anvil, and they'll pick the song thrush, they'll pick the snail, sorry, up by its shell and whack it on the rock to crack open that shell and get into the meaty part inside. And I've actually seen them doing it out the back. It is a very, very big talent of theirs. But when it comes to the nesting season, the female will build the nest out of twigs and moss, and then line it with feathers, as a lot of songbirds do. And she'll, like a lot of songbirds, she'll raise a clutch of about 2 to 4 chicks again. So yeah, the chicks will leave the nest at about 13 to 14 days old. And yeah, basically the lifestyles of these birds is so complex you can't even imagine. Like every single different bird has developed a certain skill or adapted to any kind of change that may have occurred, but they are in decline. They are very severely in decline, with different types of gardeners, using different types of pesticides to reduce slug and snail numbers in their garden. And honestly, if it was my garden, I wouldn't do that, because I know that these birds need these food sources. It is very important to keep the ecosystem going. So yes, so that was my little factoids of the day for garden birds. So now, if the weather holds off, I'm going to take you all on a little walk down to this monument I mentioned and see what is about. So I just left, you could say, the last sort of remnants of civilization on this part of town. I'm now in the open country, and you say this road is lovely because you've got the lower part of the road to walk across, and then you've got, when you reach certain points, you've got stairs or ramps that take you up onto the higher part of the bank, and you can see you've got pretty much 360-degree vision. Oh no, pickup trucks going the other way. Yeah, there's a lot of stuff to see out here, and hopefully I might get a few shots of some ground nesting birds in the fields nearby. So first spot of the day, if you listen carefully. That rattling. I don't know whether they're nesting here or not, but I don't want to disturb them, so I'll just walk on by. Now, for those of you who don't know, that rather rapid rattling you heard just then was the call of the infamous magpie. Now, of course, a lot of people will know magpies from the old nursery rhyme / superstition, one for sorrow, two for joy. Where that superstition arose from, please don't ask me, I have absolutely no idea. A lot of these nursery rhymes originated back in Tudor times or during the Middle Ages, so it was probably something of a similar sort, maybe Victorian times. But yes, of course, a lot of people do still believe in the superstition. I do admit, whenever I do see a lone magpie, I do spring a salute. It's it is sort of nice to hold on to something like that, you know, just to make yourself feel lucky in a way, but you're never really sure if it works. But yes, for years people will spring a salute or greet them with a sort of "Good morning, Mr. Magpie" or some such greeting, thought to ward off bad luck. But magpies are definitely some of our more colourful corvids. They are, of course, corvids as in members of the crow family. And, of course, from a distance they appear that very handsome, striking blend of black and white. But if you look very closely, you'll notice they have a few little extras that will show up in certain shades of light. Hang on, I'm going to change hands. They have a very resplendent blue on the wings, and purple and green on the tail. I've personally never seen them that close, so, but I have seen it in the pictures, and it is pretty beautiful actually. But yes, magpies are about 44 to 46 centimetres long. Most of that is taken up by the tail, and you will notice they have a very rounded wings like most crows, and the tail will show up very well in flight as it's fanned out. And they often form flocks like most corvids do, although we won't see them like this most of the time. We often think of them as solitary birds, but they do form flocks, especially those that don't mate, because magpies' territories are so extensive that half the time some of them don't actually mate, so they form these large roaming flocks to find food, and some pairs will actually form within those flocks and find the nesting site for themselves. But magpies need a territory of 15 acres in order to fill up their nesting site. And the pair will build a nest out of wood and leaves high up in a tree. And the female will lay about 6 eggs in total. No more, no less. They are very specific, magpies. Very green, lined with brown. And they'll feed their chicks for a good 28 to 30 days until they're ready to leave the nest, and then they'll feed them for a further 4 weeks afterwards. Now when food is in short supply, there is unfortunately a chance that some magpie chicks won't survive. So, but if some don't, that does give the others a chance to prosper. But yes, that is a sad fact of life. Some don't make it, unfortunately. But magpies are like all crows. They do feed off some seeds and insects and fruits, but their primary source of food is carrion. Now they'll take any sort of roadkill they find. I had the very lovely sight of seeing when I was cycling along the riverbank one day, a dead hare on the road, and these two magpies had plucked out its eyeballs. Now that is very gruesome, but sadly that is nature's brutality. And yes, they will raid nests. I've seen them raiding the nests of things like moorhens, Canada geese. They'll plunder the eggs. And also they'll even take rabbit kittens. Unfortunately, they will take rabbit kittens out of their nests if they get if they can get their beaks on them. But yes, that is nature's brutality, as I said. Crows are quite possibly some of the most hated birds in the world because of the way they feed, plundering nests and such, but sadly they are part of an ecosystem. They are basically the undertakers. If we didn't have them to clear up all the dead animals, I think we'd have a lot of rotting corpses lying around everywhere. So yeah, horrible but true. Now this is the monument I mentioned earlier, the charm tree. Now this was made, well, it was opened back in 2005, I'm not too sure when it was made. But all these charms, as you can see, like the hand, the violin, the fish, the bird, these were all made by local school children. Yeah, it was a bit before my time. I wasn't at school until 2005, and this was opened, I believe, 3 days after my birthday. Yeah, it's nice to come out and see this nice little landmark of. So this was the second thing that I wanted to catch while I was out here today. The resplendent lapwing. Now it's feeding at the moment. I don't think there are any nests in this field, but that's not confirmed as of yet. They're very alert, lapwings. They walk around, keeping their heads up most of the time. And of course they'll bob down when they see something. They eat worms, insects, and they'll nest in good walking distance of a good food supply. So that can be anywhere from open farmland to reed beds to marshland, where their chicks can walk easily and find something. Now lapwings, of course, like magpies, they appear black and white from a distance, especially when they're flying in their flocks. But if you look closely here, you might be able to see the very dark green upper parts on its wings, which account for its name, green plover. If you look even closer, probably can't get it on here, but also on the wings are a very resplendent mix of bronze, purple and blue. And then, if I get it in the right angle, you might be able to see the chestnut coloured undertail, which may only be showed when it bends down to feed. If you look there, there it is, very chestnutty. So yes, lapwings are also, of course, known as the peewit, owing to their very resplendent flight display when they're courting. And the lapwing comes from the sound their wings make in flight, because they are very rounded, their wings, and they make a lot of noise when they're flapping about. Now, the males do a very rounded and bobbing sort of display in flight, where they sort of rise and fall above the ground, and they utter a very raspy pee-wit sort of call. And they grow their crests even longer during the breeding season, because the longer crests will attract the females more. And then they'll lose that during the winter and regrow it again for the breeding season next year. Now lapwings are ground nesting birds, and that can cause problems for them, because if their nest is plundered by crow, it can be rather hard for them to recover. So they'll have to move to a completely new site. But browning farmland like this is the perfect place for them. And I had the lucky opportunity when I was working out at Holcombe National Nature Reserve in Norfolk to actually go out and mark lapwing nests so the farmers wouldn't spray the eggs with pesticide, because they were nesting in very bare fields, and they dig a scrape. They just dig a little scrape in the earth with their feet and lay their eggs in the cup that they make there. They lay anywhere from 2 to 4 eggs, and the eggs are a very mottled brown. And you can see why when you look at them, because I could not see them until the rangers pointed them out to me. They were so well hidden in the earth that, honestly, you need pinpoint vision to see those. And sadly, some crows do have that. But yes, it can take anywhere from... The chicks hatch out and they're very downy and fluffy, and it can take anywhere from 5 to 6 weeks until they reach proper flying stage. So what happens is the chicks hatch out after about 3 or 4 weeks of incubation, and the adults will tend to them for further 5 to 6 weeks before they're ready to fly. They're very vulnerable to predators like gulls, crows, foxes, weasels, all that kind. But they can walk within hours of hatching. And they're able to feed themselves pretty much soon after birth. But the thing is, chick survival depends very heavily on how far they have to walk. A good place like this field here is good for them, because the vegetation is very low. It's got plenty of space for them to eat. It just depends on how many predators like crows are around. As I said before, I don't think there's any nesting here, but I've only seen the one, so I can't confirm. Unfortunately, lapwings have suffered a very, very bad population decline due to their eggs and other plover eggs, like golden plover, ring plover and all that, being a very favourable delicacy at the dinner tables. Why, when it's so easy to just get chicken eggs, I have absolutely no idea. Obviously, the rarer the bird, the more exclusive the delicacy. But now creating special areas like this to ensure they have enough space to breed is imperative to their survival now. Now here's one that I've been wanting to cover while it's been in the garden, but it hasn't come down. The beautiful goldfinch. One that seems to be becoming more and more common in gardens, while greenfinches, I've noticed, seem to be getting slightly rarer, which is worrying. Oh, he's off. Now if you can just see him on that branch there, this was a bird that I was really hoping to capture while I was out here today. Oops. I'm zoomed right in on him, so it's very hard for me to get a still image, but if you can see him just there, a bird that is a true symbol of British spring and summertime, the yellowhammer. Known of course for his little bit of bread and no cheese song. There he is. That's a male just there. His very resplendent yellow head. Whoops. I apologise for all the swaying, but I am zoomed right in right now. A resplendent yellow head, brownish back. Females have a very more sort of mottled yellowy head. Isn't he beautiful? He was singing a few minutes ago, but he stopped. Right, I'll tell you more about him later, because I can't really stunt here. I've just got back to the end of the bank, and I just ran into an old friend here who'd like to say hello. Hold on a second. Hey Roops, you want a cameo in today's vlog, old buddy? You wanna come say hello? Or are you too busy nibbling the grass? This is Rupert, the Shetland pony. He's lived here for years. Doesn't take any notice of you. Stands there eating the flowers and just ignores you, but he's lovely. He's an old boy now as well. He's been here since... Actually can't remember how long he's been here. I haven't been coming and walking down here too long, but he is still beautiful. So here I'm just walking home. And yeah, that was Low Road. It's lovely. Yeah, different. As I said before, different sides of the town seem to have different types of birds that you can more commonly see around those areas. It's actually kind of nice. You know where you can go to look for stuff. And yeah, I did want to try and capture some of the swallows and swifts that you see down there, because there's a lot of swallows and swifts along that bank. But unfortunately, trying to catch a single swallow in this camera, or a swift for that matter, swifts are even worse. It's like trying to swat a gnat. It's hardly worth the effort. So unless you've got like a massive flock that you can just catch fleeting glimpses of each one of them, it's really not worth it. But yes, swallows and swifts, of course, are summer visitors to this country. And you might think that swifts are related to swallows and martins. They're actually not. They're their own sort of birds, swifts. Swallows and martins are related. Swifts aren't. Now swallows, of course, are the biggest of the lot. very blue-black along their wings, very sharp-pointed wings, long forked tail, chestnut around the face and the white belly and chest. Swifts are black all over, more sort of rounded, pointy wings, shorter forked tail, and swifts are swifts. A lot of people will probably try and remember which are the ones that stay on the wing all the time is swifts. Swifts barely ever come to land apart from when it's the nesting season. They'll feed on the wing. They'll even sleep on the wing. They are that proactive, it's crazy. And then of course you've got house and sand martins. House martins nest in relatively the same sort of areas as swallows do, but swallows nest mostly in barns. House martins, as you probably may have guessed, nest on houses. They both build... sorry, I'm going a bit too far ahead. House martins are the same sort of colour as swallows, but they have a whitish chin, black head, and as well as a white belly and chest, they also have a white rump as well. That's the area around the tail. And they have a short forked tail. Sand martins are brown and white. And of course you'll only see them around rivers and sandbanks. Now they're a lot more sociable than house and sand martins, because once they get here, house martins often sort of split up and lay their own individual nests. Sand martins nest in colonies along the sandbanks. And surprisingly enough, despite being the smallest, they get here first. They arrive in early March, while the swallows and swifts and house martins often arrive in, say, April or May time. And they're very different because sand martins dig holes in sandbanks and they build a nesting chamber at the end. Now the entrance tunnels will probably be about 1 metre long. They'll build a nesting chamber at the end, and they'll lay about 3 to 4 chicks, multiple broods in a season, and they'll feed on things like leather jackets, mayflies, crane flies, all sorts of gnats, midges, all that kind of thing, and feed their chicks on it for about 2 to 4 weeks or so, and then they'll show them the way back to Africa when the winter comes. Swallows and house martins build their nests out of mud in a small cup on the side of on the walls of a barn or a house, and they'll line it with feathers and straw and mud, and they'll do the same. They'll lay about 2 to 4 eggs, raise the chicks for a good 2 weeks, continue to feed them after they've fledged for a bit, and then of course when the nesting season's over they'll lead their chicks to Africa. Swifts are a lot different to the other two. They build their nests out of nothing but saliva. They build their nests out of feathers and saliva, and they nest in something. Now I've never actually seen them nesting naturally around houses, so I can't be sure. But naturally they nested in cliffs before houses came along. And now if you see like a swift nesting tower, they'll have very sort of thin slots in them, which resemble the sort of cliff faces that swifts originally nested in. And the nesting platforms are very flat. So they need a sort of flat ground to build their nest on, put their feathers in, and line the saliva around it. But yes, as with swallows and house martins, they'll lay about 2 to 4 eggs. And yeah, it's pretty much the same principle. Any sort of flying insects like flies, gnats, midges, anything like that, they'll feed their chicks on. And yeah, when the breeding season's over, they'll all fly back to Africa. And they all fly to the south of Africa as well. It's remarkable to see how far they fly. 6,000 miles in total. You wouldn't believe it, would you? Anyways, I'm getting back into town now, so I'll fill you in a bit more later, but yeah. Okay, so we're nearing the end of the vlog, and I figured I'd take a little bit of time to explain more about that yellowhammer I spotted. So, yellowhammers are members of the bunting family. Now, they originally get their name from the German name, which depicts their family, Emberizidae. Now, Emberiza means bunting in German. The English origin of bunting is unknown. Whether it just came from the translation, that's still unknown. But yes, yellowhammers are part of the Emberizidae family in the buntings. Now, they're very common around the UK. They're not quite so common up north, and certain parts of Ireland, Wales, around there. But they're very common down south. And for me, they are a proper symbol of British spring and summer, because that's when you'll often hear the males coming out and singing their, as I mentioned before, little bit of bread and no cheese song. And I actually have that on my recordings, if you'll just give me a moment to find it. Need to remember the track listing again, because these aren't named, which is annoying. No, it's the one after that. Now listen to this. You can hear it, can't you? A little bit of bread and no cheese. Now for me, that really is a true symbol of spring, hearing that out on a walk on a sunny day. It's beautiful. It really is. So basically they are about the size of a sparrow, very famous for their song, and buntings normally feed on different seeds of things like wildflowers and such. So yellowhammers prefer those of more sort of starchy flowers, so common nettle, dock, knotgrass I think is another one, and they also eat grain quite a lot. They do prefer grain because that contains a lot of starch and glucose and such. But with the loss of wildflower meadows being cleared out for farmland and such, they have unfortunately suffered a very big decline in their numbers. But as more wildflower meadows are being replanted across the country in places like Rutland, and several fields are being left fallow here for them, and there are various sort of wildflower plantations being made across the UK, they are slowly starting to recover, which is good, because losing little things like that, it's a tragedy, it really is. Now, when it comes to making a nest, they'll build it relatively close to the ground, but in amongst a thick bush, out of different things like leaves and moss and grass stems and such. And the chicks they'll have about 3 to 5 chicks in the nest. Brooding takes about 12 to 14 days, and fledging about 11 days afterwards. They'll continue to feed their chicks after they leave the nest, and they'll add insects into their diet when it comes to the breeding season. They'll feed their chicks on stuff like beetles, flies and grasshoppers, and just to make sure that the chicks have enough insulation. And as always, they'll need to protect their chicks from ground predators such as weasels, stoats, rats and grass snakes. But yes, some will possibly migrate south during the winter to find better food sources in warmer climates, but most do typically stick around. So yes, when you're walking, be sure to take a little look around, a little listen out for that proper little bit of bread and no cheese song. It's a true beauty. So yeah, that ends the vlog for today. And next week I'm intending to take you guys out to a little reserve, not too far away from my house, and showing you what you can expect to see around wetlands and such. Now, quite a lot of things people will probably already be familiar with, but there will be a few little extra rarities, as I visited the reserve earlier this week and saw a few things I actually didn't expect to see. So hopefully we will be quite lucky down there. So yeah, I look forward to seeing you guys then.